Amazon bestseller, amongst other books that he has written. He's an educator, he's an inspirational speaker, and Dr. Tuttle obtained his Ph.D. from the University of California in Berkeley. But more interestingly, which I find resonates very well with me, Dr. Tuttle, is that you were a former Zen monk and a Dharma master in the Korean Zen tradition. So we may pose you some questions in relating to veganism and the philosophy relating to the Dharma. He's also an accomplished musician. And interestingly, his wife, Madeline, is a visionary Swiss artist. So, I mean, amongst both of you, you covered everything the world needs to know. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over the session. It's almost 7:30 now. I'm going to in the morning here. I'm going to hand over the session to you, and I understand you're going to speak for about 40 to 45 minutes.
Yes.
And then we'll have the rest of the session for about 45 minutes for question and answers, or in a discussion.
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
So all yours.
Thank you so much.
The platform is yours.
Appreciate your many efforts to help bring everyone together and to discuss these important issues. And so Happy New Year to everyone. I know this is the Western New Year. It's January, right? Beginning of the year 2021 here in early January. And I am honored to be able to speak to you about the World Peace Diet, about the Buddhist Dharma teachings, animal liberation, and spiritual awakening, and the way that we can create a more healthy, harmonious, and compassionate world that's in alignment with the truth of the interconnectedness of all life, which I think is really the goal in many ways of our individual practices and also of our communities, our spiritual communities, and the Dharma teachings really emphasize, I think, the importance of cultivation of our own internal mental states to bring them in harmony with our true nature through meditation and through selfless action and through trying to understand more deeply who we are, actually, to do self-inquiry and understand our true nature. So what I'd like to do is just talk about the underlying ideas of veganism and vegetarianism, and then talk a little bit specifically about veganism and how it relates to the Buddhist spiritual teachings and spiritual awakening in general. And then, as we just heard from the venerable colleague and brother, we'll have an opening just question and answers, and I'm happy to discuss any questions anyone has. So welcome everyone, and here we go. We'll just go ahead and dive into it. So I want to just emphasize at the very beginning that I think the basic news I have to share is good news. The good news is that we as human beings have a physical body that does not require us to kill animals to be healthy. We have no physical need for animal flesh or for dairy products or for eggs. So that's the really good news, just to understand. And I myself have been a vegan now for over 40 years. And I'm sure I'm just as healthy and probably quite a bit, actually much healthier than people my age. And I'm not the only one. There's, I'm sure, literally many millions of people who have been eating a plant-based diet for many decades and who are just as healthy and probably quite a bit healthier than the average population. So this is the good news, is that we don't need to imprison animals, to impregnate them against their will, to steal their lives, to steal their purposes, to steal their milk and their eggs and their babies and all these things that we're doing. It's not necessary. So that's the good news. And so one of the main ideas, of course, in Buddhist teaching and practice is the precepts, the 5 precepts, 10 precepts, and then, you know, beyond that, many more precepts. But the precepts of living, the 5 basic precepts, I just want to say at the beginning, are very important in Buddhist practice: not to kill, not to steal, not to sexually abuse others, and not to lie or deceive, and not to drink alcohol or take drugs or cause others to use liquors or drugs which are harmful to them or which confuse them and weaken the mind of others. So the whole idea, these 5 things, unfortunately, all 5 of these things we are doing to animals, non-human animals, on a massive scale in our society. And we are, I think, suffering the consequences. The animals are suffering the consequences. So I just want to emphasize how important I think it is that we broaden our understanding of the 5 precepts. And in the Buddhist teaching, and I think really in spiritual teachings generally, we shouldn't only be kind and loving to human beings. We're called to be kind and loving and respectful of other living beings, of all sentient beings. If a being can suffer, then it's not only human beings that we should be respectful of, it's all sentient beings. And this is a very integral part of the Buddhist teaching, and I think other traditions as well recognize this. All traditions recognize, and we see this with our companion animals very easily. We would be very unhappy if our companion animals, like dogs or cats perhaps, were to be maliciously harmed by others for no good reason, unnecessarily. And so the fact is, of course, that cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and ducks and geese and lambs and sheep and fishes are all as sentient as dogs and cats, and really in many ways as human beings. They have the same central nervous system that is capable of feeling pain and suffering. They also have psychological capacities to feel fear and pain, and have sadness when their relationships are destroyed, mothers when their babies are stolen, whether they're cows or pigs or other animals will be very upset emotionally. They have social pain, emotional and psychological pain, like in many ways, like we have. Some scientists actually say that the pain that they experience is more acute because we as human beings can rationalize and explain suffering to ourselves, and so that can help distance ourselves from the suffering, whereas animals just feel it directly and may suffer in some ways more acutely than we do. So I think we all feel at a deep level a yearning to protect animals from unnecessary violence and abuse and cruelty. And we try to protect them. Every government in the world has certain laws in place to protect animals. But one of the main reasons I wrote the World Peace Diet was to really help us to understand how important it is that we do treat animals with kindness and respect. The main idea is that when I wrote the World Peace Diet, and I think it's still the same today, we know that we have a long list of very serious problems in our world today that we're trying to solve. We have problems with war, with conflict, with injustice, with poverty, with social inequality, with disease, and with hunger and starvation, with inequality between men and women, and racial inequality. And there's so many problems, all those problems, and environmental problems, deforestation, and global climate destabilization, and water pollution, all these problems, a long list of problems. And on that list, everyone would agree, one of the problems that we have as part of those problems is human abuse of animals. You know, everyone recognizes that is a problem. However, most people will say that that problem is not very important compared to all these other problems that we humans have, our own problems, our disease, our social injustice, our poverty, our hunger. You know, that's the most serious problem. And so the whole idea is that we'll take care of those human problems first, and then later, after we get those solved, then we'll care about animals after that. You know, that's kind of farther down on the list. That's not so important. But I really wrote the World Peace Diet, and I'm speaking today to encourage us to take much more seriously the reality and the consequences of animal abuse by humans, that human abuse of animals should be much higher on the list. Number one, because it is so much more, it's such a bigger amount of suffering. We human beings are killing and confining hundreds of billions of animals, far more than there are human beings on this planet every year. Literally trillions of animals are killed every year when we include marine animals. So we're talking about a system of killing and hyper confinement and mutilation and abuse of animals that goes far beyond, by orders of many orders of magnitude, what we do to each other in terms of sheer amount of violence and misery that we are actually inflicting and that is being experienced by sentient beings. Animal agriculture and eating these animals, as well as using them in experimentation and vivisection for products, for entertainment. There's so many ways that animals are abused and trafficked and killed and so forth. So that's number one. And number two, which is very important, is the fact that the practice of animal agriculture leads in many ways directly to these other problems. In other words, the fact that we're eating so much meat and dairy products is the direct reason we're cutting down trees in the rainforest at an unsustainable rate, destabilizing the climate, causing a mass extinction of species, causing the destruction of indigenous populations of people, causing tremendous amounts of disease, because animal agriculture is so wasteful, it's causing hunger and poverty that wouldn't be happening. We're growing enough food every year to feed at least 10 billion people, probably closer to 12 or 15, or some experts say 20 billion people every year, if we would feed all of the corn and soy and alfalfa, other grains that we're growing, if we fed them to people directly. So what we're doing with animal agriculture, the physical act of eating meat and dairy products and eggs, is causing the problems that we're facing of disease, of hunger, of environmental devastation, of injustice, because this injustice leads directly to war and conflict. So animal agriculture is causing the problems that we are facing. It's actually invisible. We don't recognize it. We haven't made that connection yet. It's not talked about in the mainstream media. Governments do not talk about this. So it's really important, I think, for us in the Buddhist community and in general, anyone who's interested in creating a world of harmony and peace, that we look deeper, we look more deeply into the causes of the problems we're having. It doesn't help to treat the symptoms of a problem if you don't treat the causes of the problem. And so animal agriculture is the cause of the problem on the physical level. But what I really want to talk about is the second aspect of that, which is that animal agriculture creates within us as human beings a certain way of thinking and a certain mentality and set of attitudes that cause these problems at a deeper level. In other words, animal agriculture and eating meat and dairy products and eggs requires us to disconnect from our natural wisdom and compassion. In the Buddhist tradition, this is referred to as prajna, for example. Prajna is wisdom, karuna is compassion. These are Sanskrit words, but the teachings are that the most important thing we can do is to cultivate karuna, cultivate compassion, cultivate prajna or wisdom. And animal agriculture requires us to reduce and destroy our natural empathy and kindness and caring for others, for animals, for the work. Think of the workers. Think of people who have to kill animals all day. These workers have the highest rates of suicide and drug addiction and alcoholism and spousal abuse and child abuse, worker-related injuries. They're just stabbing animals all day and harming them, and sexually abusing them all day. That's what workers have to do. That they have to impregnate animals. They have to steal the baby pigs or the baby cows or the baby chickens from their mothers, kill the babies, and impregnate the mothers again. I mean, this is terrible work, the most violent, terrible work that any human being can ever do. And we pay people to do that. And so animal agriculture requires us to have a society that brings out the worst in people, in the workers and in us, because then we not only take out our wallets and pay people to do this violence, to cause tremendous suffering to these animals, both acute suffering and chronic suffering, and acute pain and chronic pain, but then, and the workers and the ecosystems are destroyed, and water is polluted, and air is polluted, and climates are destabilized, and rainforests are cut down. And it's the most devastating thing we do to the environment and to future generations is animal agriculture. So it's to our society, to our physical health. So we cause all these problems by voting for it with our dollars and paying for it. But then we eat it. We actually eat that. We bring the energy and the reality of violence and terror and fear and pain and despair and anxiety and misery and sadness, all of those terrible negative emotions that animals are feeling and that people are feeling, the frustration that they feel and the revenge and so forth. And we eat that, right? We're eating that reality of that. And then we want to sit and meditate and create world peace. I mean, it's not going to ever happen. It's never going to work. It's completely against the spiritual teachings of the 5 precepts of the Noble Eightfold Path. And everything. You cannot be eating animal-based foods, really, I don't think, and be serious about following a path of spiritual awakening and liberation and human liberation, because animal agriculture requires us not only to harm animals, but to create an inner mentality and set of attitudes that promotes harming others for my own benefit. That's the opposite of the bodhisattva ideal. And in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, as we all know, a bodhisattva is really the ideal that we strive to emulate, where we are willing to help others, and even if it hurts us, we're willing to help them, right? That's the whole idea. Even if I have less, but I want to help make others happy, because we know ultimately this is the only way that we'll be happy, is if we help make others happy. People who want to become happy themselves and don't care about the happiness of others end up never being happy. People who care about others and try to help others to be happy, then we get happy because we're all interconnected. There's one life living through all expressions of life. It's like my hand, there's all these different fingers. And if each finger says, oh, I'm taller than you are, and I'm better than you are, and they fight with each other, that's because they're ignorant. They don't, and if they have their own separate desires and they're competing with each other, then the whole hand becomes crippled. And we're like that. We're all fingers on a gigantic hand, right? We're all part of a larger being. We are interrelated on such profound ways. Our happiness is interrelated. The more we work on our own inner peace and treat others in our relationships with kindness and respect, because we feel at peace with ourselves, the more we help others to be at peace, the more they can treat others with peace. So peace spreads throughout our society through kindness and actions of love and caring and respect. And animals are just as sentient as we are. So if we build a society based on animal agriculture, where every morning we wake up in the morning and we eat meat, or we eat dairy products, or we eat eggs, right away we're causing suffering. We're eating that suffering. We're sending a message to our body and to our mind that I don't care. I don't care about the suffering of others. I don't care about the suffering of hungry people, of future generations, of workers, of indigenous people, of ecosystems, of wildlife. I only care about myself. I only care because it tastes good, or because that's my habit. That's what my mother told me. That's what my father told me. That's what the ads on TV tell me I should eat. That's what my doctor told me I should eat. It's self-centered motivation. And what the Buddhist teachings are always emphasizing is that liberation for us as human beings comes about through compassion and wisdom. And wisdom is recognizing that there is no fundamentally separate self. And this idea that I am a concrete, fundamentally separate self, separate from other separate selves, that's the basic ignorance which causes me then to want something and not want something, right? We have ignorance, avidya, and then out of avidya, we have craving. I want this, and I want that, and I want that. And then we have all this attachment and wanting and lust for more things and ambition. And then we have the opposite of that, which is I don't want that and I don't want that. We have hatred and we have ill will and we keep them away. We don't like them. They might get in the way. So we're always in the struggle of wanting something and keeping something away. And that's samsara. And that's the samsaric delusion of suffering that never ends. And animal agriculture is the main force. Eating meat and dairy products and eggs is the main force driving samsara. We force the animals into hell. And when we force other beings into hell, we end up in hell. Whatever we sow, so shall we reap. Karma really works. And so if we're going to sow seeds of misery and terror and pain and stealing the purposes and the milk and the eggs and the lives and the flesh of other beings, we're going to lose that ourselves. We lose our own health. We lose our own happiness. But we live in a society where we don't practice that. We practice the opposite of that. We practice these diluted religious traditions that tell us somehow we can be saved, or it doesn't matter what we do to animals. It doesn't matter. And I think when we look deeply into the Buddhist teachings, we see that it does matter. When we look deeply into our own mind and heart, we see that it does matter. We all know in our bones that if we're sowing seeds of carrots and broccoli, we're not going to be reaping corn and millet or something else, right? Whatever we sow, we're going to reap. And so I think it's very important to broaden the idea of vegetarianism to include veganism, because the word vegan actually, as you probably already know, but I'll just say it briefly, was coined by a British fellow named Donald Watson, who was the secretary of the Vegetarian Society of London back in 1944. And he and a few friends wanted to create a word that would account for motivation. Because the word vegetarian does not account for motivation. I can be a vegetarian because I don't like meat, or because it's cheaper, or any reason, doesn't matter. So he wanted a word that would account for motivation, and the motivation of compassion and kindness. And number two, he wanted a word that would include all unnecessary abuse of animals. Not only non-human animals, but also human animals. I mean, we're also, from a scientific perspective, we're also animals, we're also mammals. So we should try to live a life of kindness and respect for other people, other human beings, and non-human beings, all sentient beings. So this is actually, veganism is actually an ancient Buddhist idea with a new Western English word, but it's ahimsa. Ahimsa is the ancient Sanskrit word that means non-violence or non-harmfulness. That's all it is, basically. So the definition that Donald Watson wrote down back then was that veganism is a philosophy and a way of life which seeks to exclude or eliminate as far as possible and practicable all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. So that's basically it. It's very simple. It's just simply doing the best we can to minimize the amount of violence we're causing to others, other beings, and to do the best we can to live that every day. So a lot of times we can see the violence when we eat the flesh of an animal, right? We know if I'm eating the flesh of a cow or a pig or a fish or a chicken, that's violence because we had to kill the animal to eat that. So it's obvious. When we talk about dairy products and eggs, people say, well, that's not violent. I mean, the cow gives us her milk, the chicken gives us her eggs. So they give milk anyway, they have eggs anyway, so there's no violence. So that's okay. So I think it's very important for us to extend vegetarianism to veganism, because there's tremendous amount of violence actually in dairy products and eggs. And I've done research on this for many decades, and I'll just give a brief overview just to make it clear. But the basic idea is that certainly, as we all know, a cow is a mammal like we are, and a cow will never give milk, just like a woman never gives milk unless she has a baby. So the first thing you have to do on any dairy, organic or not, is you have to have these babies. You have to have babies. So a young cow on a dairy operation she's typically they're given a variety of different hormones and drugs so that they will be able to become pregnant when they're very, very young, just babies still, right? They'll give them prolactin, progesterone, oxytocin, and other hormones and drugs to push them into an early pregnancy, being able to. And then they're impregnated on what they call a rape rack, which, again, it's a form of sexual abuse. The cow, she doesn't have a choice, right? I mean, she's just, you have a man who has a gun with sperm in it. And where does he get the sperm? I mean, it's not nice to talk about, but the sperm comes from sexually abusing male cows, right? You have to sexually abuse them to get their sperm, put it into a gun, and then put it in the vagina of the cow, and then pull a trigger. And, so this cow gets impregnated. And so it's an act of violence from the very beginning. And then after 9 months, she gives birth to a little baby. It's the same. She has the same length of pregnancy that we human beings have. And after 9 months, she gives birth to a little calf. And it's very well known that cows and calves have a very tight bond emotionally. The cow will do anything for that little calf. And the little calf is completely dependent on the mother cow. But on any dairy, organic or not, the baby is always taken away. Always, right away, you take the baby away. That causes enormous mental and emotional suffering to the mother and to the baby. The baby is 75% of the time is killed right away. They just kill the baby. And the mother starts giving milk, but there's no baby. So they just take the milk and they sell it. But they also, and then they impregnate her again within a month. So she's pregnant and lactating simultaneously, which no mammal is designed for that. That's devastating to their health. And as soon as she gives birth to another, she's pregnant and lactating at the same time, giving milk and also growing a baby. So she has to eat a huge amount. She has to drink a lot. It's very, very hard on her body. And then she gives birth to another baby. The baby is, again, stolen right away and killed right away. And she's impregnated again and giving milk again and pregnant and lactating. So even though cows would live naturally about 25 years, roughly 20 to 25 years, on any dairy, organic or not, when they reach only 5 years old, they kill them because they're worn out. They can't give milk anymore because they've been pregnant and lactating simultaneously, which no mammal is designed to do. And so they just kill them. And one of the babies, they'll be like, usually at that point, she will have given birth to 4 babies, and then they kill her. One of the 4 babies will become a slave on the dairy. They won't kill, they kill all the males, and they kill half the females, basically. So half the females are killed. Half of the females, they'll keep one out of 4, and she'll become a slave on the dairy, and they'll do the same thing to her. So it just goes like that. Every 5 years, it's a rape and kill operation. There's more suffering in cheese than there is in a burger, I would say. I mean, in terms of just suffering of the baby calves, the mothers, and they're very badly treated. Cows are large, powerful animals. They don't like to be milked. They don't like to have their babies stolen. They're resisting. So I won't tell you, but I've seen a lot of undercover video footage of what goes on dairies, whether they're big dairies or small dairies or little family farm dairies. The cows are terribly treated. They're kicked and punched and stabbed and terribly abused routinely. That just goes on. You only find out about it when people work undercover and have a hidden camera and they take videos of what's going on. And people who do this say there's never, ever any operation ever where they don't find terrible cruelty to these animals. So it's always happening. And we should never think that there's some kind of a place where these loving farmers taking care of their cows, because you have to kill them. You have to kill the males. You have to kill the males. You can't, otherwise you have to just feed them. And you can't just keep feeding cows. You have to kill them. So there's no such thing as compassionate milk. There's no such thing as compassionate meat. You have to kill the animals. The same thing is true with eggs, actually. It's the same system. I mean, chickens normally, naturally, in the jungles of Southeast Asia, would only give a handful of eggs every year. But now through genetic manipulation, they force the hens to give a lot more eggs. And these eggs, of course, are stolen from them. The females are all kept together. There's no males allowed. So it's a very violent system. It doesn't allow females and males to live together. And it's, again, stealing the eggs from the animals and then killing the animals. Typically, most eggs come from battery cages where the female animals, the birds, are confined terribly. They can never spread their wings their entire life. I mean, it's really torture, terrible pain and suffering for these animals. There's probably no more violent and cruel food in the world than an egg. Egg has the more suffering I can't imagine. I mean, that's a typical egg has a tremendous amount of suffering. And it's the domination of female animals. I mean, we have to remember that it's really, it's the domination of male. I mean, the male hens, male chickens that are born on an egg operation, they just grind them up alive or suffocate them alive as soon as they're born. So it's a terrible, violent death for the males, but the females have it worse because then they're confined. They have their beaks chopped off, which causes terrible pain to them, both acutely and chronically. And then they're hyper confined and their eggs are stolen. They're very often force molted, which means they're starved and deprived of water to shock their system to give more eggs. So it's a very hideous, violent system, and it's based on dominating the female animals. And I think from a spiritual point of view, the most important thing is to cultivate mindfulness, to be aware of our actions, to be aware of the consequences of our actions. And when we have a system in place that causes us to not be mindful, right? It causes us, we don't want to think about where our eggs come from if we're eating eggs. We don't want to think where our cheese or milk or ice cream are coming from if we're eating them. We don't want to think about where our fish and pork and burgers are coming if we're eating meat. We want to reduce our mindfulness. We want to not take responsibility for our actions. I mean, this is the complete contrary to the Dharma. It's the exact opposite of the Dharma. You can't get farther away from the Dharma than cultivating a sense of, I don't care about the consequences of my actions, and I'm not going to be mindful. I want to be unconscious as possible. I mean, you can't get farther away from the Dharma than that. That's the extreme opposite. It causes suffering that always comes back to oneself in this life or the next life. And so we have to realize that in many ways, it's not our fault if we're eating meat or dairy products or eggs. It's just simply we're born into a system where we're taught to do that from the time we're little children by very well-meaning, loving people like our parents and teachers and friends and neighbors and relatives, and everybody does it. That's the only reason anyone eats animal foods, is because we're following orders. You know, we're just doing what we've been taught to do. We're just following the orders that everybody is doing. We're just going along with the crowd. We're just being part of a system without thinking about it, without questioning it. So what veganism is, and I think really what the Buddhist Dharma is, what the Buddha did at the very beginning, 2,500 years ago, when he left the palace, and he said, I'm going to question old age and sickness and death and the possibility of spiritual awakening. He didn't just live a normal life. He said, we have to leave home. Now, leaving home means we question the official narratives in our society, especially those narratives that are toxic, that are harmful, that cause unnecessary suffering to other beings and to ourselves, that cause delusion and ignorance and violence, and create bondage and suffering, that create birth in the lower realms. Because animal agriculture and eating meat and dairy products and eggs are all terribly violent and abusive to animals and to ourselves. And that's another point I just want to make briefly here. And I'm going to wrap it up here in a few minutes. and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at that point. But it's very important to understand also that animal flesh is not healthy for us to eat. I think we understand that. It's very well documented now by science and medicine that a diet that has a lot of meat in it causes a lot of problems: heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, and many forms of cancer, strokes. These are linked to diets that are high in meat, especially fatty meats that are high in saturated fat and cholesterol. Animal protein in general is very toxic for us physically because it causes acid to form. So it's also inflammatory, and it's well understood that the hospitals are filled up with people who are there because their tissues are inflamed and acidified, basically, which comes from eating a lot of processed foods, and especially meat is a very big contributor to that. And so to cut meat out of our diets is great, for our health. We'll find our arteries will run cleaner. Our digestion is not designed for meat. We don't have teeth that and a jaw and saliva and digestive juices really that are acidic enough to digest meat. So it's much better not to eat meat from the point of view of our health. And that's well understood nowadays. But it's really important to understand that dairy products and eggs are even much worse than meat in terms of our own physical health. That especially dairy products and eggs, both of these, because dairy products are a food that is designed specifically for a bovine animal, an animal that's going to put on maybe 1,000 pounds, maybe 500 kilograms in 1 year. It's very rich and high in fat, very high in protein. It has a certain type of protein, in fact, called casein, which is the main protein in cow's milk, which we cannot digest. Human beings cannot digest casein. No one, whether the Europeans, Asians, no one can digest casein. In order to digest casein, you need to be a little calf. We need an enzyme called renin, which calves have in their stomachs. We do not have renin. So anytime we're eating dairy products, especially cheese and milk and skim milk, these have a lot of casein. So we're eating a food that causes massive inflammation and acidification and cancer. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer are well understood to be caused by dairy consumption, by consumption of casein, because we can't digest casein. It causes autoimmune diseases, all these leaky gut problems, Crohn's disease. There's so many diseases, multiple sclerosis, all linked to dairy. There's one thing that's causing the hospitals to be filled up in pharmaceutical industry to be making a lot of money and having lots of disease, which gives a lot of money really to these big pharmaceutical companies. It's dairy products. If we would stop eating dairy products, it's worse than meat in terms of sickness, in terms of violence, in terms of sickness. There's nothing worse than dairy products. We're not cows. So to eat a food designed for another species that's so different from us makes no sense. It's really terrible. And eggs are the highest concentration of cholesterol of any food on the entire planet Earth. So it's been well documented that eating one egg a day gives a cancer risk equal to smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. So eating eggs is eating cancer causing foods, just like dairy. Dairy is also linked with cancer. And both of these foods are terrible. Diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis, these are all linked to dairy and egg consumption because our bodies we have a wisdom. And when we go against the wisdom of our body, we go against the wisdom of our spirituality, we force ourselves to abandon the precepts, to abandon the practice of meditation, of mindfulness. When we can still meditate, we can eat meat and dairy and meditate, but the foods that we're eating and the mentality that we are cultivating in many ways is the opposite of a meditative mentality, in the sense that we're causing suffering that's unnecessary. There are alternatives to dairy products. Now, when I became a vegan 40 years ago, there really wasn't any alternative milks or alternative ice cream or alternative cheese. Not that we really need that, but today there is, right? Today there's all kinds of soy milk and rice milk and almond milk and oat milk and coconut milk and hazelnut milk and everything you can think of, and cheese and ice cream and butter and everything made from plants that looks and tastes a lot like dairy products. And the same thing for eggs. There's egg substitutes as well. There's meat substitutes, and there's tofu and tempeh and vegetables and fruits and grains and nuts and seeds. There's plenty of food. There's more variety than we can ever imagine. So it's just simply, so why would we eat animals? Why would we eat dairy products? Why would we eat meat? Why? What's the reason? Why do we do it? We have to really ask ourselves, why do we do it? Is it because we're just on a habit without thinking? We just eat what we told because we like it. We have a preference. But that's not a reason. I don't go steal somebody's watch from them and say, well, why did you steal his watch? Oh, I liked it. I just took it. I mean, you can't do that. You can't go steal somebody else's milk, steal somebody else's eggs from kill their baby and steal it because you like it. I mean, that's not an option. That's like as far away as you can get from any kind of authentic Dharma teaching. So our preference or our habit, or because we're not thinking, we just do what we're told, we just follow orders. We wouldn't just follow orders if they were to harm our family members. We wouldn't just do it. Why do we do it when it's animals? Or because the doctor told us? Well, get a second opinion. Just because the doctor tells me I have to eat dog meat, that doesn't mean I'm going to start killing dogs or horse meat or cat meat or any other flesh. The whole idea is we are called to take responsibility for our actions. And that's really what freedom is. Freedom is taking responsibility for our own lives. Freedom is taking responsibility for our own health. Freedom is taking responsibility for our own quality of our consciousness. I can't, if I'm unhappy, I can't blame it on other people. I have to take responsibility. And I think this is really the essence of the Buddhist teaching in many ways for our world today. We're always we're taught by the media to blame germs and viruses or to blame enemies for our problems. And the Buddha was saying, no, we have to work on ourselves. We have to work on our quality of our own consciousness, take responsibility for the quality of our mind, to have a mind that's in the present moment and that's filled with goodwill and kindness for others, because we understand that we're not separate from others. And when we have that understanding and we live from that understanding, then we create a field of healing. And then when we create communities where we promote these ideas and we discuss these ideas, then we are helping to heal our world. So I just want to thank all of you, because I know that you're part of communities that are communities based on service and kindness, compassion, healing, freedom, taking responsibility for our actions, being a force in the world of caring. And that's the essence, I think, the essence of the Buddhist teaching, is to combine this outer life of kindness and respect and caring and compassion to help others, and an inner life of reflection and contemplation, and then looking deeply and seeing the deeper causes of things, to be willing to question the official stories in our society and to trust our own inner wisdom, which I think takes a certain amount of practice, of daily meditation, a certain amount of courage to just be able to stand on our own feet, and then to lovingly support each other in the process without blaming anyone, without criticizing anyone, without shaming anyone, to realize that we're all wounded. We're born into a society where that's what everybody does. So we've been programmed in many ways to eat these foods, to think in these ways. And so now it's about healing our wounds, healing the inner wounds, healing the wounds of our behavior, and helping others to heal. So that when someone else is wounded, we don't hit them or yell at them or blame them. we try to be loving and kind to them. So all the words I'm sharing this evening, I hope you understand, are words of love and kindness for you, for animals, for future generations, for all of us. It's simply to raise awareness about the consequences of our actions and to heal our own delusions through looking deeply and clearly into the underlying causes of the problems that we're having, so that we can then be part of the solution and create communities of kindness and caring. Because I think that's the underlying idea, is that the only reason we eat animal foods is because of the communities that we're raised in. So if we can transform our communities, then the future generations, the children, will be born into communities where they're not eating meat and dairy products and eggs, where they're encouraged to be kind and caring, and to look deeply and to care deeply, to listen deeply, to feel deeply, to be like Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of listening, to just listen deeply to the cries of the world, and to hear the cries of the world, and then to respond to the cries of the world as skillfully as we can. And that takes cultivating prajna and karuna, compassion and wisdom, which I think only happens in community, when we're living our lives engaged in an engaged way. All right, so thank you all so much for your kind attention, for the efforts that you're making. And I think we're at the point now where I'll take a little break here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much. I'll take a little break here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tuttle, for an excellent presentation. We have with us today Parajo, Master De Huang, Master De Yi from the abode in Hualien, and they have some questions they would like to address. So I will pass you on to the abode now.
Okay.
Okay, Brother Joe. And
Okay.
oh, yes.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation as well as utmost gratitude, because Doctor gave us a very in-depth and also a very self-reflective. I think many of the facts that you mentioned touch deeply into all of our hearts. And what can we do, I think, is the question that everybody in their mind thought about. What can I do? Knowing that all the suffering that we are seeing and witnessing and making possible, we are all part of it. We're all complicit in all of this. What else can we do? And I think that is the burning question in all of ourselves. We need to talk more. We need to preach more. We need to do more. And I think that's what everybody collectively, after hearing Doctor's speech and sharing, I think that is our collective strength. Here with me, here in Taiwan, Hualien, we're already on January 2nd, so we're past the New Year's joy and celebration. We're now very much down to earth, thinking about all the problems ahead. And here with me are the abode masters, the masters of the Jingsi abode, and they've been sitting here and listening for the entirety of Doctor's talk, and they are vivid promoters of vegetarian diet, or the vegan, as you mentioned. Inspiration. It's not just a word, but it's actually a thought, an idea, a movement. So I would like to ask two of our fellow abode masters here to provide very simple feedback to everybody, as well as Doctor, for your kindness and sharing. Thank you. And first, this is Dharma Master De Huang, here from the Hualien.
Good morning, to everyone. Again, thanks for Doctor's share about why we want to go for vegan. Actually, is asking in an article. They say, do you know what is the largest graveyard in the world? And I think the answer is our stomach and our mouth and our the organs of eating. So this is the biggest graveyard, in our physical body, especially our stomach. And we add a lot of animal creatures' life into just to make us to feel satisfaction. So, and actually there's a saying, you are what you eat. So I think there's a time for those who are not vegan or vegetarian. I think it's time for us to make a decision to stop, curb our desire to take any animal flesh or meat or dairy products or eggs. This is very not necessary for our human of a sentient being who's saying that we are the smartest sentient being, that actually we are torture the animal life. So I think the best goal for vegan is to nurture our compassion. This is why I heard for the beginning, the first time, why we want to go for vegan or vegetarian, the reason. So it very inspired me. So I think it's time for us to work hard together and put more effort and to try to promote to our friends or families or relatives who are surrounding us. So anyway, thanks. I will give the time, pass it over to our master, the E, and I think she also give some feedback regarding the sharing just now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dear Master of Abode, Dr. Tuttle, Joe, and our overseas volunteers, greeting. First, I want to thank Dr. Tuttle's sharing. It's been very inspiring. And just as you said, we are part of the system. What we do will impact the whole universe. So being vegetarian is not only good for our health, but also protect our earth. So I hope all of us can invite more people to join our force to promote vegetarianism, so we can be more harmonious to the society. I really like the whole city group, and it's been very meaningful. So I hope more people can also join us. If I have time, I will also join this online study group more often. And it's very last, and I wish everyone a very happy New Year. Thank you.
So thank you to our masters here, and indeed, thanks to Dr. Tuttle. I think one of the hardest thing really for me, I've just recently switched over to vegan after nearly 15 years of vegetarian, and I think the hardest part is as Dr. mentioned, connecting to our spiritual self. It's not even about knowing. Look at how many people know that smoking cigarettes is bad for you. Look at how many people know that drinking and driving is bad for you. Look at how many people know that doing drug is bad for you, but they still do it. I think knowing is the first step, but how do you awake that prajna, that wisdom in you to see that? So the moment for me to let go of my, like as you mentioned, something that are not replaceable, like ice cream. Okay, so how do I let go of that? Is I realize that's part of the cultivation. You are attached to the taste of it, just like you're attached to the taste of meat. There's no difference in changing from meat eater to vegetarian than to change from vegetarian to vegan, because you're always attached to that taste. And as Dr. Tuttle, you mentioned, it's that spiritual disconnect. How could you do that if you know? But we know, but we just chose not to follow through with what we should do. And I think that's something that we need to let out this information. A lot of people, when they know, they will stop. But there are more people, even after they know, they will not stop. And that's when the spiritual connection will come in. So once again, thanks, Dr. Tuttle. That is it's very inspirational. And now I pass back to Brother Chin to continue with our panelists sharing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Joe. So just to let you know, Dr. Tuttle, we know our Zoom capacity was packed. Then they overflow into the YouTube, and then was Facebook. So altogether, we had about 270 people who logged in to listen to you live from around the world. And I can safely say that based on what you've said, veganism is actually going to be part of our practice. It's a part of practice that resonates very well with letting go of our desire, knowing ourselves, the self in us, mindfulness, loving kindness, and compassion. So perhaps maybe we can start off by having organizing some vegan parties around to get together. So now I'm going to have three members in the panel. There's Dr. Eddie Chan from Malaysia, Sister Pin Ru from Singapore, and Sister Ai Chu from the US. So can I just call on Dr. Eddie Chan for your comments or any questions that you may like to have?
Dr. Will Tuttle.
Dr. Eddie Chan.
Yeah, I'm very grateful and
yes.
Really thanks and appreciate your review to us about different aspects of veganisms and what is the philosophy of the veganisms. Okay, so that we can know more detail about it. And you also mentioned very many aspects from spiritual, from environmental, and as well for health issue. I have a few questions I would like to ask Dr. Will Tuttle. One thing is regarding the lab-grown or cell culture meat, which they claim is not involved in killing or environmental more friendly. Okay, so there's two questions about it. The first question is about cell culture meat. Okay, they said paint, they still create paint from the animal to take the cell from the animal, and the cell can keep on cloning after that. So even some medicine also come from animal source, just like insulin, etc., on some hormone. What is your view in spiritual side on cell culture meat? There's our first question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eddie. And that's a really important question. And I don't want to be overly dogmatic in my answer, but I would say overall that I have serious doubts about the ultimate benefit of using meat or other products like medicines that use animals. I think the old saying is the ends do not justify the means. And we're just moving into this idea for the very first time of lab-grown meat. We don't really have anything yet commercially available, but apparently in Singapore, there'll be some coming out soon, and maybe in other countries it'll be coming soon. But we don't really know the consequences of this, and I've looked into it quite a bit, and I think on the surface it looks good. It looks like, oh, now we can make real meat, like animal tissue meat. We can grow it in a lab, and people can eat meat, and it won't take so much. It'll be so much resources. It'll be more efficient. There won't be any suffering to animals. So it's like this great idea. But there are some problems. One is there are some researchers who've looked into this whole process, and they've said that from an environmental point of view, there are problems in getting a lot of the required inputs. Some of the inputs are not that easy to get, and it's not totally known now also whether you don't need to use quite a bit of animal product like bovine growth serum and other things that come from dairy cows to keep the bio laboratory machinery running. So there's also scientists who have said that the risks from this of any kind of biological contamination in these laboratories could create terrible things, could create diseases that we don't know about, could create products that could be very dangerous to people. So there are many risks to, I think, to lab-grown meat that we haven't really figured out an answer to. And then the other, my other criticism of it is that it's still meat. It still has this idea that we should be eating the flesh of animals, and we don't need to. I mean, you know, we can eat grains. We have tofu. We have tempeh. We have seitan. We have many plant-based foods that are high in density and high in protein. Plus, we have many other wonderful vegan foods already, and we already have like the Beyond Burger, for example, which is just grains and beans. People who are experts cannot tell the difference between real the chicken and this chicken that we have now that's just made from plant-based ingredients. So I think that, you know, maybe it will help, but I personally, I'm not excited about it, because I think it just creates this idea of humans eating meat, eating the flesh of other animals, and we're not designed for that. We don't have the teeth for that. We don't have an urge to just go out and kill animals. And so I'm hoping that we can help people can transition to plant-based ways of eating without the lab-grown meat through education and through just understanding that there's so many beautiful foods that don't need to have these big laboratories, you know, which are hazardous. They have to be super clean. In these laboratories, you know, you can't go into one of these laboratories that makes lab-grown meat without a whole suit on. You have to wear a whole, like a space suit. You can't get any germs anywhere. It's very artificial and unnatural. And we can just have gardens and fields and grow rice and beans and corn and vegetables and grain, eat that, and we get all the nutrients that we need. We don't need anything else. I mean, you know, it takes a lot of money and investment. It has risks. It has a lot of risks, I think. So that's my basic feeling. And the same thing about medicines. I think we should try to have, we shouldn't use animals. We shouldn't test on animals. We shouldn't harm animals for medicines. We should have medicines that are more natural, herbal based, and really focus on cultivating a healthy body and mind. Now, here I am. I've been a vegan for 40 years. I've basically spent no money in the medical establishment. I haven't gone into a hospital or I haven't never bought a drug in any drugstore ever in 40 years. And I think if we're living our lives in alignment with our values, if we're eating healthy, if we're having healthy relationships, if we're exercising properly, eating organic is very important. Organic, whole foods, plant-based foods. That's a wonderful foundation for health. And if we are doing the best we can to take responsibility for our own health, then we don't have to harm animals, make them sick, and steal their bodies and minds to make ourselves healthy. I think that's a dead end. It's not a good idea, and it's part of the same problem. To be healthy ourselves, then we don't have to really worry about getting sick or making other people sick. This whole idea of contagious diseases, I think we should see that what's really contagious mainly is fear and love. So if I'm being loving, I'm spreading love. I'm spreading, if people get close to me, then they're going to get healthier and they're going to feel better. If I'm really afraid and angry, then people that come around are going to feel more afraid and more angry and more upset. So those are the things that are spreading, I think, our quality of our consciousness. So I think the most important thing is to cultivate a positive consciousness of health and live that, be very simple, natural, and the earth will provide us with everything we need to be healthy. We have to get into harmony with nature and with each other and stop abusing animals and thinking we can harm them and get healthy ourselves. It's never going to work. You know, we can't make animals sick and then we're going to be healthy. If we make them sick, we're going to be sick. That's how it works. That's what the Buddha taught. Whatever we sow, we reap. We can't sow sickness in other beings and create all this complicated, violent methods and be simple and happy. You know, it doesn't work that way. That's a great question. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.
Dr. Will, I think you gave a very great answer on that. And I think I learned one very important aspect from your answer. And your answer actually have answered the second questions. Actually, second questions actually, I would like to ask you, because now more and more people are more aware of health and environment. So many people turn into vegetarians or even vegans, okay, because of the health and environment problem, okay, and they're more aware about this. So when talk about cell culture meat, okay, or lab culture meat, they promote in a way that is at least is a less environmental impact, okay, and this is more healthier compared to normal animal farming because of a less hormone injection and everything. Maybe you can answer further on this question. What do you advise for those vegetarian people, okay, who turn into vegetarian because of environmental and health, okay, not because of the spiritual side. But you do teach me one thing is that whatever things when we promote a plant-based diet to people, you finally still need to link finally to the spiritual side or to the moral side, because without the spiritual and moral side, okay, people can do all things just for the self-interest, interest. Okay, so these are one good things I learned from your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's great. You know, if people do more research and they learn that, for example, you can feed between 10 and 12 people eating a plant-based diet on the amount of land it takes to feed one person, the standard sort of Western diet. I mean, it's so wasteful. We have to cut down trees. We have to take huge amounts of water and petroleum to make milk. It takes 1,000 liters of water to make 1 liter of milk, for example. I mean, it takes so much water. It's so wasteful. It pollutes water. It destroys the soil, destroys the jungles, the habitat. We've seen it. I remember going to New Zealand with my wonderful wife, Madeline, many years ago, well, not that long, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And she had been in New Zealand about 30 years before. And she kept saying, you know, we've got to go to New Zealand. It's the most beautiful country in the world. It's all the beautiful forests and the clean water and everything. So we finally went there a few years ago and it was terrible. I really was shocked because in the 30 years since she had been there, they had grown a very large dairy industry in New Zealand. They have one of the largest dairy companies in the world is based in New Zealand. And so when we were there, we drove all over both islands, the North Island and the South Island, especially the North Island. They had these huge areas that were clear cut. They cut down all the forests. They had cows grazing everywhere. The streams were muddy and polluted and full of cow manure. It was just so ugly. It was ugly and polluted, and they were making a lot of money, I guess. And it was funny because I remember when I was in Taiwan and people were eating dairy, and I remember asking the people, I said, "Well, in Taiwan, you don't have any dairy here, do you?" And they said, "No, we get all our dairy from New Zealand." and then I went to New Zealand like a few weeks later, and I could see the result. And in a sense, there's so much destruction of the environment. So I think if we care about the earth and about nature and about wildlife, that's somewhat of a spiritual and ethical motivation in caring about future generations. But of course, we also care about ourselves because we want to have a beautiful earth. We want to have clean water and we want to have clean air and so forth. So the self-centered motivation of just wanting a better earth for ourselves and a better environment for ourselves, that's good, but we need to have a deeper motivation, I think, for caring about future generations and wildlife and ecosystems and indigenous people, and and starting people, all these others, and the animals themselves, caring about them. And I think that when our motivation grows to this deeper level, then we don't ever have we don't just say, well, I'll just have an ice cream today. It won't, just one little bit won't hurt anything. If I'm only doing it for my health, or if I'm only doing it for the environment, then maybe I'll have an egg and I'll have some milk and I'll have a little piece of meat now and then. It's no big deal. But if I know that if I have a piece of meat or some milk, it's directly causing a cow to be harmed or a pig to be harmed, I'm not going to do it. I mean, it's so much more liberating when the motivation goes to beyond just myself to caring for others. Then there's this, one is at 100% committed, which is actually very liberating, because there's a sense of just being relaxed. It's like, I'm not going to steal from someone. I'm not going to go out and sexually abuse someone because I want to. Maybe now and then I'll sexually abuse someone, or maybe now and then I'll steal from them. I just feel like it. No, it's like, we know not to do that. It's the same thing when we see animals as beings, and we see ecosystems as beings. When we see indigenous people and future generations as beings, we're not going to harm them unnecessarily. It just becomes much more clear that we're all interconnected, and that we can live a life that reflects a certain purity and a certain kind of humility. It's like, I'm not any better than someone else. Why should I harm them? We're not superior, really. We're all in this together. And I think that attitude is liberating, not only for us, but for animals and for everyone. And that's why I think it's beautiful to see spiritual teachers, spiritual practitioners exemplifying a life of kindness and compassion. And then people who are maybe not so spiritually oriented, they'll see that there's a better way to live. And that example will inspire them, hopefully, to want to do something in a more positive way. And then if we can make it easier for them, I think that's important. Make it more available. If we can somehow have it in all the stores and in all the restaurants, and easily available, that makes it easier. But in the beginning, it's difficult, because people have to go out of their way to get the organic and the vegan. But then the more we do it, the more we share, the more we educate, the more we exemplify, there's more people doing it, and it just gets easier. So it's really about reaching a critical mass, I think, of people who understand and who are doing this, and it makes it easier for everyone else. So that's the path that we're on, I think, of just trying to increase the momentum and increase the awareness and deepen the motivation.
Very great and inspiring answer. Dr. Tuttle, there's one thing's quite controversial in medical community, is that it's related to the research using animal study, and the system of research in healthcare is set up in the way that it start from a lower level of research, okay, successful, then we test on animal before we test on human being, okay. And some, for example, in cancer research, sometimes they even inject the cancer cells into the animal to make it become cancerous before we give treatment again, okay. So of course, it developed a lot of controversial issue regarding that, okay. Of course, there are people talk about that we human born in this world, we are constantly using the world resources. No choice, we survive in this world. We're constantly using human resources. But if we're using some resources, okay, the benefit for humankind by sacrifice something else, okay, so that's how they feel is justifiable. But of course, it's very hard to say a right or wrong answer. But I just would like to, I'm interested to know about your view on that.
All right. Thank you. So I personally I am very opposed to vivisection. I'm opposed to using animals at all for any research of any kind. I think we have no right to use them for research, that it always harms them and it always harms us. In the long run, it harms us. I mean, really, you look at what's happened in the last few hundred years. I mean, we've been testing on animals more than ever, and we have more disease than ever. We have more disease and more people taking drugs, and more heart disease, more cancer, more diabetes, more liver disease. The diseases are worse than they ever have. We have people now with getting more vaccinations than ever and getting more diseases, more autism among children, than more nervous diseases, more psychological illness. This is a big mistake. There's two types of science. Science itself, I think, is potentially a noble undertaking of acquiring knowledge through doing both inductive and deductive reasoning and experimentation, and then having communities of researchers check their results with each other. But there's also dark science. And I think most of the science today is dark science in a certain sense. It's science that's used to profit corporations, to get control over nature, to dominate animals, to exploit animals, to dominate people, to exploit people, to track people, to get more profits for industries, to get more minerals, to get more wealth. It's using science to dominate and exploit animals, nature, and ecosystems. And this kind of science, unfortunately, we think that we're getting more knowledgeable, we're getting actually less knowledgeable. What I see actually happening is that there is an ever increasing amount of ignorance and misunderstanding in the world, and that increasing misunderstanding and increasing ignorance is organized and is propagated and is educated through schools, and it's called science. And it's an increase in ignorance and an increase in misunderstanding, and it leads to an increase in violence, an increase in disease, increase in injustice and inequality, increase in a few people dominating everybody else, and using science to do that. So I think thousands of years ago, especially in Asia, there were tremendously wise people who lived lives in harmony with nature, who were exemplifying to us ways of living in harmony with nature, where they lived long lives in health and harmony. And the science that they had was in harmony with nature, and a lot of it was internal. They were exploring their own consciousness, and they were exploring harmony with water, with air, with herbs, with energy systems. They knew things that we can't even imagine. I think they had much more wisdom in the past in many ways. And our system, especially it's a Western-based science, in many ways is based on violence and on domination of the sacred feminine dimension of life, and is based on dominating and exploiting animals and using animals to get knowledge. And it actually makes us, the more knowledge we get, the more stupid and foolish and ignorant and violent we become, to the point where we're just all sick and using and creating massive weapons that can wipe everybody out and destroy all life on Earth. And that's the result of animal agriculture, because animal agriculture is primarily a Western, from the West. I mean, it's primarily something that was specialized and created in the West. And it's spread throughout the world because of Western industries like McDonald's and Burger King and the IMF and the World Bank. And there's a lot of that happening. So I think, well, it's not to blame anyone. It's like, maybe, this is how it was supposed to happen. Maybe this is what humans had to go through, I don't know. But the basic idea is, here we are, we're in a situation we can see. I think clearly we should be able to see that experimenting on animals gives us these drugs, which they're causing more misery and suffering than ever. I mean, I'm so glad I haven't taken any drugs in over 60 years. I've stayed out of the whole system, and I would never take a drug. I just wouldn't do it because I don't want something that was tested on an animal. I would rather die myself. I'm not going to do it. So I don't want my life to be dependent on killing somebody else.
Yeah, so thank you.
Well, I'm just mindful of your time. We've got another 15 minutes more. How are you for time? How are you for time, Brother Will, Dr. Tuttle? How are you for time?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good? Okay, right.
Yeah.
Right, because we got two other panelists.
Two other questions. Okay.
Question as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Eddie. There were some very interesting questions, and also for the answers I've given. And it resonates so well on the one of the that we shared early this morning, where we discussed about our consciousness, about inner awareness, as well as sort of mindfulness on our part. Now, relating to what Dr. Eddie asked and what you've said, I've got a question here from one of the participants. The husband was having chemotherapy, and it was chemotherapy for every 2 weeks, and his hemoglobin was really reduced, was unable to do the next chemo unless he boosts up the hemoglobin level up. Now, he was advised by the doctors to take beef to boost up the hemoglobin. I mean, what would
beef?
To take beef, beef, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
To boost up the hemoglobin. So what what would you do in a situation like this?
Well, you know what I'm going to say. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to kill a cow.
Right.
So that I get more hemoglobin. I mean, that's what the doctors would say, of course. They'd say, they might say, well, we've got these, kill the dog. If they say, well, you've got to kill a dog to get the energy, to get the meat and the energy to be healthy, then the person might say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to kill a dog. But why would you kill a cow? We have to think of it. There's another way of doing it. Like right now we're at a health center in Florida called Hippocrates Health Institute. People come here from all over the world because they have cancer and they have other, diabetes and other serious illnesses, and everything is healed. They have a much higher rate of success of healing, and it's all done through organic, vegan, raw food. And meditation and alternative therapies like that. And so I think a person could think, okay, I'm going to try something else. Maybe try cleaning my body out. If someone has cancer, they've already been listening to the medical system for too long. And they've been suppressing the symptoms for so many years that finally they have this serious illness, a cancer. The problem is their body is polluted, it's full of toxins. They've got to get rid of the toxins. You're not going to heal it by doing more toxins and more violence. It's not the way. So one has to realize there's other ways of healing based on harmony and based on cleaning the body and meditating and having a positive approach rather than this chemotherapy approach.
Okay, thank you. So relating to what Dr. Eddie said earlier about the lab-grown meat, now I understand that in Singapore, the government has approved the production of self-cultured meat. So let us now go to Singapore. We have a Sister Ping Ru, who's with us, and Sister Ping Ru.
Yes. Hello. Hello, Dr. Tuttle and brothers and sisters. This has been an inspiring talk. I hear about sexual abuse in schools among my students every now and then, But today is the first time I hear about sexual abuse in animal agriculture. So this afternoon, I'm going to get Dr. Tuttle's book and read up more. I am so inspired, and I am just wondering what made Dr. Tuttle set up the World Peace Diet website? And the second question is, what keeps you going? Because it's very obvious to everyone that you are so passionate and we are so inspired. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so yeah, we created the World Peace Diet website basically just to help create a forum for people to learn more about the work that we're doing. And we've been able, right up until March of last year, to do a lot of traveling. I've traveled to over 50 countries in the world, to all 50 states in the United States many times. We've given over 4,000 lectures promoting veganism. And the website has our tour schedule. There's essays that I write, books that are published, the music that we create, Madeline's art of animals, the trainings that we give, the online trainings, the World Peace Diet training program and the facilitator program. So people go more deeply, and then those people can train other people. So all of that is related, I guess, to your second question, what keeps us going, which is basically just, I think, the same thing that keeps you all going. It's just, we know that we're only on this earth for a few decades. Our lives are very brief on this earth. We just have a few days here, really. It goes by very quickly. So for the short time that we're on this earth, just to do the best we can to be part of the solution to the problems rather than just being part of the problem and making things worse. And so I realized many years ago that the most important thing is inner cultivation of the mind and the heart, that's really the foundation of everything. We can never have a healthy world if the individuals are not healthy. And it doesn't help for me to try to change other people if I myself have not changed. So most of the effort really, in many ways, is self-cultivation, to take time every day to meditate and to study and to contemplate and to connect with nature and to make sure that my relationships with the people in my life, with Madeline and with friends and neighbors and people around me are healthy. And then out of that, from that foundation, then to do what I can in the world to help others, to do education efforts and outreach and communications and conferences and so forth. So, but I think the underlying thing is just the sense of a precious human life, right? This human birth is so rare and so precious. And then to have a human birth and then have a healthy body and a healthy mind, to be in a society where we have some freedom, we can actually study the Dharma, we can actually talk about these teachings. We should never take this for granted. We shouldn't let fritter it away. We should take it very seriously and wake up every morning with a sense of gratitude that we have on one more day to do the best we can to be a voice for all sentient beings, to be a voice for animals, to be a voice for people, to be the hands that bring healing, to be the mouth that brings some encouragement, some love and caring to others. I think that's really it. We don't know, we could die anytime. Today could be our last day. We never know. So to make the best of every moment, to make the best of every opportunity that we have. And this life goes by quickly, so make the most of it while we can. It's a very precious, very brief existence that we have here, and we don't know what the next life will be. So it's really important to cultivate our wisdom and compassion in every moment, every second. And I think if we create a vegan movement that's based on inner cultivation rather than just trying to change the world, but to change the one person we can change, which is myself, that be the focus. And then from that, bring the inner peace that we were able to realize and get a glimpse of into our movement. And it's one of the things I love about the Buddhist teaching, about the what I know of the Tzu Chi movement in general. It's really based on living this as individuals. So I'm very honored to be able to share these ideas with you and with everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Peng Ru. You got any other question?
I'm really so inspired. It has been raining for more than 24 hours in Singapore, non-stop.
Wow.
It is a big thing in Singapore because it's a very rare thing in Singapore. And so I think it's timely to hear the sharing, and because it only inspires me to do more, to spread the message. I've heard so much about the cheese, but I never got to read about the details. So I'm really going to get the book both in English and Mandarin, Chinese languages. I read on the website that's been translated into 16 languages. So I think it shows the extent and the impact throughout the world. So
Yes.
definitely going to share with more teachers and my family and friends about what I've heard and learned from Dr. Tuttle this morning. This morning in Singapore right now. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Sister
Peng Ru is an educationalist in Singapore, so she has a lot of students following for her.
I see.
Now, we just for information, Dr. Tuttle, as you speak just now, it's being translated into Mandarin for some of the Mandarin speakers. So I was just been told that we had actually at the peak almost about 330 locked in live to listen to you. Okay, around the world. 330. That's a lot. And so we're gonna move on to somewhere nearer to you, to the US. So we have Sister Aichu. All to you, Sister Aichu.
Happy New Year, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Tuttle, for your compassionate, inspiring, and informative talk. Here I have, in 2014, North Bay Vegan Book Club, studying your book, World Peace Diet. At that time, I love your book because I named my son World Peace when he was born in 1986. And I said, wow, World Peace Diet. And then after we read about it, I learned more. And today, I took 2.5 more pages notes from your talk, and we got more tools to convince ourselves and all people around us to be vegan. I have been a vegetarian since 2009, but now I'm going to aim for being a vegan. And thank you for your very convincing talk today. And also, I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Number 1, as you said, as Buddhas, we know that causes and consequences are related. If we want to promote veganism, we really want to know what are the causes. So from your 40 years of being a vegan, and also thank you for practice what you preach. You are a living, wonderful example of how wonderful it could be to be a vegan. So what are the top 3 causes you've seen that people don't want to be a vegan? And the second question is following that. What are the tools, what are the things we could do to counter those, to remove those causes so we can have a harmonious and peaceful world for everyone?
Okay, so what I think of thank you very much, Aichu. I think the main causes for people eating animal-based foods, that's your question. Probably the 3 main ones, if I can put it into 3. It's one of them certainly is infant indoctrination. You know, this is the main reason, really. It's infant indoctrination. From the time we're born, as little infants, our mothers and fathers and friends, neighbors, relatives, everybody around us is eating animal foods typically, and so we do too, you know. And it's in from the very beginning. And you go to the grocery store, look at little baby food jars, and you'll see turkey and veal and chicken, cheese very often. So as little kids, we get this food, and our body has to adjust itself to those foods, even though they're not foods that we really would naturally eat. Our body has to adapt. It's like if you gave cigarettes to a little kid as soon as they're born, you know, their body would adapt as best it could, but it would get addicted, right? And so we get addicted really in many ways to meat and dairy because our bodies have to adapt to something that's really not natural for us. We're not little cows. We shouldn't be eating dairy. We shouldn't be eating the animal flesh, especially not the amounts that we're eating. So infant indoctrination is probably the biggest reason. It's just, it's what makes it so hard also, because it's my own mother. My mother gave, you know, she cooked the food and she made it. You know, you're questioning your mother and your father, you know, and everyone, your relatives and family and so forth. And then I think the second main reason is, as we get older, it's the social pressure. You know, social pressure, essentially other people, you know, the people around us. We don't want to be different. We love to fit in. We like to be part of the group. We like to eat what everybody else is eating. And food is the main way that we human beings bond. It's over food. When we have a celebration, we always have a feast. We always eat lots of food. If I show up and say, well, I'm not going to eat your food, you know, it breaks the sense of bondedness. There's a tribalism. You know, we human beings are tribal. We like to be part of a tribe, a group, and food is the main social bonding adhesive that keeps us together is the food. So people are very afraid of not eating the food that other people are eating that are around them. And so that's another primary reason, is just the social pressure to eat what everybody else is eating, and to conform, you know, to conform and be like everybody else around us. And then the third big reason probably, is our own individual preferences. Like I just love how ice cream tastes, or I love that kind of cheese, or I love bacon, or whatever it is. You know, we just all, you know, it's that individual sense of I like this. And also part of that also is the individual sense of my image, right? Like if I'm a man, I have this image of myself eating these foods. These are manly foods, or, you know, whatever it is. Or if I'm a woman, these are foods that are more feminine, but, you know, animal-based foods. I just love maybe some kind of yogurt or whatever it is. You know, it becomes part of our self-image. So there's this self-image and taste, you know, how something tastes. I think those are the three main reasons. It's other people. It's the fact that we're indoctrinated from infancy, and then for the rest of our lives, we're pressured by society. And then we have our own habits and tastes, and our taste really it's quite changeable. I mean, you know, if we can change our taste pretty easily, but once we get used to something, we usually don't want to change it. We think, well, I like that, and that's the only one I'm going to like. And so I think it's important to realize two things. Number one is these three forces are very powerful. I mean, these are powerful forces. Infant indoctrination is powerful. Social pressure is powerful. Individual habits and tastes they're all powerful. But the good news is they're all based on an illusion. They're all ultimately very weak. As soon as any kind of awakening happens in consciousness, all three of those just evaporate. You know, and it happens all the time. Someone will suddenly make the connection. They'll see, oh my gosh, you mean this cheese caused that kind of suffering to a cow? You know, and suddenly their infant indoctrination just evaporates. Social pressure doesn't matter. Their taste goes out the window, and they just change. You know, it happens all the time. So these are powerful forces, but they're also based on illusions. They're based on lies. They're based on falsehoods. We don't need them to be healthy. Taste is something that's very changeable. We can easily get used to different things. Like right now, I mean, I've been a vegan for 40 years. I just love, you know, how plant-based foods taste. And it's not difficult to switch over. I have no desire, obviously, for anything else. And so that's the good news. And so that's what I would say in order for us to help people to make the transition. I think the most important thing is to be an example ourselves, a positive example, to make sure we're eating healthy food ourselves. So it's important, I think, as we're vegans, to eat organically grown foods because if we're not eating organic, we're getting a lot of herbicides, pesticide, fungicide, hormones, residues, all kinds of stuff is in foods. Even if it's vegan, it can be in the food. So it's important that we eat organic plant-based foods and whole foods also as much as possible, not eating processed food, because again, there's a lot of preservatives, artificial colors, chemicals, all kinds of chemicals and things. So try to eat food that's healthy and then be healthy, take time every day for exercise, for meditation, for connecting with nature, for creating positive relationships so that we can be a good example of someone who's eating a healthy plant-based diet. And then instead of trying to change other people, that's probably the main point I want to make, is like the idea is like, how can we help other people to change? The best way to help other people change is don't try to change them. Don't try to change people. As soon as I'm trying to change somebody and they can feel it and they say, no, they start fighting, they start fighting back. I know I would be the same way. If someone came up to me and I could tell they were trying to change me, I would have my boxing gloves on and I'd be trying to protect myself. That's a natural, healthy response. We shouldn't let people change us. If we want to change, we should initiate the change ourselves. So I think the best way to help change other people is to don't try to change them. Just try to change myself. If I myself can actually be a vegan, then the whole world will start to become vegan. What is being a vegan? It's being loving. Veganism is love. That's all it is. It's actually living a life of loving kindness to others, not just theoretically, but actually practically. It's like I'm not going to pay other people to stab and abuse animals because that's not loving. That's harmful. That's violent. And so, and I'm going to do the best I can to be kind and caring in my speech and my thoughts and my words and my actions to others, to humans and to animals. That's what being vegan is. Being vegan is being kind and loving to human animals and to non-human animals in every thought, word, and deed, in every relationship, as much as possible to live that. So that's a full-time job. That's something to really work on all the time. I can always become better at that. I can always have a mind that's more filled with love and kindness and generosity and caring and tenderness and mercy and gentleness for others. I can always improve that. I can always increase that. And so I think when our vegan movement becomes a movement of self-transformation to be the change we want to see in the world, to actually live a vegan life with kindness, then our movement will be unstoppable. It'll grow so fast. It'll go, the whole world will go vegan very quickly if we really work on ourselves. The problem is, oh no, I'm not the problem, you're the problem, I got to change you. And then we start trying to change people. And then we get into this whole mentality of how we can strategize and manipulate people and make them change. And that's like animal agriculture. We dominate and exploit animals, and now we're trying to dominate and change other human beings. The whole idea is to abandon all of that and to just try to, like the Buddha said, to enlighten ourselves. And when we do that, then our actions follow naturally. So I think one of the best things we can do, Mahatma Gandhi talked about this word in Sanskrit, satyagraha. Satyagraha. Satya means truth, and graha means power or force. So it's truth force or truth power. And so the idea is if we just speak our own truth with love and respect, then that's the best way to change others in a positive way, because we're not trying to change them. So, and I think the one statement that is always universally true that we can always say is this: I'm so happy that I realized that the only reason that I was eating animal foods all those years that I did in the past was because I was just following orders. And now I'm not doing it anymore, and it's great. That's it. Don't say anything more. And that's all there is to it. I'm so happy that I discovered that the only reason I was eating meat and dairy products was because I was just following orders. And then I realized it wasn't a good idea, so I'm not doing it anymore, and it's fantastic. If we just say that, and if it's true for us, it's really the truth. I'm so happy. It's really, I can say that I'm so happy that I realized I was just eating meat because I was following orders from well-meaning people, but they weren't good orders. It wasn't a good idea. Eating meat and dairy was harmful to animals, harmful to me, harmful to the earth. So I'm not doing it, and it's fantastic. So when someone else hears that, it goes right in to them in a very loving way, because it's just truth. It's just my truth. I'm not saying you should do this, you should do that. You're bad because you're not doing what I'm doing. I'm just saying I'm happy because I figured this out. And that's all I'm saying. And the other person will on a deep level will say, wow, well, that's true for me too. The only reason I'm eating meat and dairy is because I'm just following orders too. They'll say that to themselves eventually. They'll realize that. And then nobody wants to just live their life as a robot, just doing things that are harmful because they're following orders. And so you've planted a seed, and the person's own compassion and wisdom will water the seed. And that plant will grow inside of them, and it'll be vegan. It'll be a vegan plant. You know, their life will move in that direction because you just planted a truth seed, a seed of truth, because you were just honest. You just were loving and respectful and just shared your truth, satyagraha. And I think if we as a movement can just share our own truth in a loving way with people and say, look, I've learned how to make this delicious food. It's healthy and it's great. And I just think it's fantastic. And without trying to change people, then they're not fighting back. They're just open to the teaching. And I think that's the future for our movement. And I think it is happening. We are learning, and we are going in that direction. And I think the Buddhist Dharma is one of the greatest ways, because the Buddhist Dharma always encourages us to work on ourselves first. And from that standpoint, we can then help others. So that's a great question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tuttle. Thank you, Sister Aichu. We have actually exceeded our time. And so is it possible, Dr. Tuttle, that I could just pose a question from this question that came from one of the participants, if I could take that as the last question, if that's okay with you. The question was, so the question was, how are there any, what would you advise to summarize it, to promote veganism to the community? Now, I think the mind of people is such that if you indoctrinate veganism, they will fight back. And the question is, how would you go around convincing that obviously they want to change? We can't indoctrinate on them, but the question is, how do we get them to buy in so that they are willingly wanting to do that?
Right. So I think, the basic idea, like I just said, is to avoid the temptation of trying to indoctrinate people or to try to change them, but to create a context. The more we can create a context for people to become, to see the benefits of moving to a plant-based way of eating and living, a vegan way of eating and living. So I would say, number one, like I said, satyagraha, speaking our own truth. We can do that through videos, through social media, through giving cooking classes, through conversations, through writing books, through making music, doing art, all kinds, any kind of communication. That's helpful. I think another thing, we're in this kind of strange thing now with social distancing and wearing masks, and hopefully that's not going to go on forever. But I could see like vegan restaurants, for example, where people can actually taste the food, serving vegan meals. One of the things I love, Suu Kyi, is giving vegan meals very often to people who have fires or hurricanes or disasters in their area, so they can realize that they're being loved, and they're being loved with plant-based meals. To create festivals. I mean, one of the things that was really booming for more and more up until recently was vegan and vegetarian veg fests and festivals, where people can come and just learn different, about food and so forth. But any kind of way that we can help people to think about these ideas. I think also some people tend to be more oriented towards doing things politically. So I think, introducing legislation to protect animals or to encourage people eating a healthier diet. There's lots of groups that are working in that direction to help, educate people in that way. There's some people that are there's some doctors that are working to help educate doctors about the benefits of a plant-based diet. And these are all things. I think the most important thing is to, whatever we do it with kindness and love and respect. That's the most important thing. To treat other human beings the way we would treat cows and pigs and chickens, right? Treat them with love and respect. It's easy to treat these animals with kindness because they're not offending us maybe, but other humans can be more challenging. So that's why the inner work is so important. It's important for us to, I think, to meditate regularly, so that when it's not so much what we're saying to people, it's how we say it. It's who we are as we're speaking. That's what people really hear. They hear that the actual words and concepts and the ideas are much less important. The most important thing is how we are, how our gestures are, just the way we are. If we're smiling, if we're kind and loving, if we're listening, if we're healed. I think as vegans, we have to realize we're healers. We're here to heal the world. We're here to help relieve the wounds of people. And that's through love and through light. You don't create more veganisms by blaming and hating and shaming and criticizing and telling people they're wrong and they're bad. You don't create more light by darkness. We create it by light. So I think more light, more love, more kindness, more caring, and working on ourselves so that we really are that way. That is the way forward, and that each one of us has unique gifts. Like Madeline, my wonderful wife, she's wonderful at painting. Other people are maybe wonderful at making videos. Other people are maybe wonderful at just talking to people or making delicious food or grow. We need people growing food and gardening. And I think there's something for everyone. We all have our unique talents and gifts. We only have a short time, to cultivate them. We need people who are maybe help make vegan investments or businesses. Whatever it is, meditating is very important. There's something for everyone, I think, to contribute. And it's all important. There's nobody that's more important than anybody else. It's all equally important that we do the best we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tuttle. Certainly, I enjoy the philosophy behind veganism. That part is interesting. That's all the time we have. I'm mindful of the fact that I'm not sure whether you've taken your dinner. It's dinner time for you, I believe. I've been holding you back. And also for Sister Aichu. So thank you. And also to Sister Pigru from Singapore, Dr. Eddie Chan, not to forget Brother Joe from Hualien, together with the Abode Masters. So with that note, thank you so much. And to all the participants who stayed back and listened. The recording is available. So for those who are interested, I think you can see from the chat where you can get access to the recording. So if I may, can I pass the session back to Sister Lily? Sister Lily, are you there? Or Sister Siu Ching? Not to forget that I would like to also thank Brother Raj and Dr. Witi who connected us to Dr. Tuttle.
Yeah, so
Sister Lily and Sister Xiu Ching.
Yeah, okay, Sister Lily, 我们可以放 the before mention. Yeah. Hey, 感恩 we're very grateful to everyone for the wonderful support, and definitely Dr. Bill, what a superb, amazing session. Trust